Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a talk on democratic politics and the far right. We are very happy to have Professor Adrian Lavalle with us. This talk is organized by Pathways Beyond Neoliberalism, which is a research program based here at the Gap School. And if you're interested, you can share more about our website and work. But again, we're very excited to have Professor Lavalle with us, who is an associate professor of political science at the University of Sao Paulo and is here in Egypt based at the UC to conduct his research on civil society, which we will hear about next. So if you can join me in welcoming Professor Adrian, and then we will start.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for being here. I'm a kind of multi-institutional affiliated researcher, so those are my institutions, the Brazilian Center for Analysis and Planning, the Center for Critical Imagination, which is the key center of the EPF Center here, This is the the Center for Metropolitan Studies at the University of Sao Paulo. I'm researcher and professor at all those institutions, and I also perform some institutional functions of representation. So let's move to the less formal part of my presentation. Before doing so, I should apologize myself because my English skills are not exactly good. So I try to be as clear as possible, but if I don't succeed, just please let me know, and I'll try to rephrase whatever I will be saying at that precise moment. So the title of my presentation is Democratic Politics and the Far Right, Civil Societies in Brazil, New Republic. And in order to understand the role of civil society in democratizing the state in Brazil, I would like to spend a few minutes in this slide just to be sure that we are all in the same page regarding the planning of the new republic. So in Brazil, dictatorship started in 1964 and it goes up to 1985. The liberalization political period starts at the end of the 70s, and by mid-85, we already have the first indirect presidential election, which is the official year of the ending of dictatorship. So after that, we have the New Republic years. The New Republic years, we can divide them for analytical purposes into periods, which this division is useful for the aims of this presentation. So we have a first period of 3 years, from 1985 to 1988, which was a period I would like to call of deepening democratization. So in this period, the trend toward democratization coming from the struggles for democratization on the last years of dictatorship were deepened, and we moved in these 3 years from having indirect presidential elections to have direct presidential elections. We went through the legalization of all political parties, even both communist parties, we have two communist parties, and we even had a constituent assembly. And the constituent assembly is amazingly important because it happened immediately after dictatorship, which means that social actors, civil society actors already mobilized during the struggles for democratization were able to reorganize themselves in order to have influence over the making of the new constitution. So the period was very short. So was already lots of people were organized, and they shifted toward the attempt to have influence over the making of the constitution. They were very successful at doing so. They produced massive mobilization, social mobilizations in Brazil, and they put forward lots of popular amendments to the draft of the constitution. So the draft of the constitution, the final text, actually incorporates some of those amendments, and they were eventually get into the text and approved. So by 1988, we have a new constitution, which is a new social and political pact, a social pact of social inclusion, and political inclusion that seals the end of the dictatorship. And there are two features of this new constitution that I would like to mention because they are important for the purposes of this presentation. The new constitution is a constitution committed to universalized rights. So it's a constitution committed to the universalization of social rights. That means universal health for all Brazilian citizens, universal education for all Brazilian citizens, universal social assistance, and so on and so forth. The second trait is that this constitution is deeply committed to democratizing the state. So the idea of participation in this constitution goes beyond elections. So it's not just about having free and democratic elections. It's mainly as well as allowing for the social control of the regular, ordinary workings of the state, which means allowing for policy influence or social control over the policies. This is important because this is exactly the role that civil society is going to play in the years of the new republic. So by 1988, we have this new constitution, and in the beginning of the 90s, we get hit by another trend, not a political trend, an economic trend, and the years of the neoliberal reforms. And this is very important because in Brazil, no matter where you look at in policies, you're going to find a mixed effect of two strong trends, a democratization trend and a neoliberal trend. And this produces a kind of mixed characterization of those years. So this makes a country with some specific characteristics that are different from those you would find in other Latin American countries. During the neoliberal years, we have 4 presidents. We have Fernando Collor de Mello, a president from 1990 to 1992, just half a term because he was impeached because of corruption scandals. Then we have Fernando Henrique Cardoso, or FHC, as we call him, 2 terms from 1995 to 2002. Then we have the 2 terms of Lula, Ignacio Lula da Silva, maybe the most famous Brazilian president in the world, from 2003 to 2010. And then President Dilma, who served 1 term and a half from 2011 to 2016, because she was also impeached. Not because of corruption scandals, but because there was a parliamentary coup. After the impeachment of Dilma, her vice president and one of the main conspirators assumed the presidency of Brazil. So Temer was the president from 2016 to 2018. And then we were hit by another global trend, which is the rise of far right to the presidency of the republic. So a politician from the fringe of the political system, very, very low-profile politician, very mediocre politician, had to move from the fringe of the political system and reach the main stage of national politics, becoming president. This is Jair Messias Bolsonaro, president of Brazil from 2019 to 2022. And as you can see here, he's from other political party, different from the political parties that actually ruled for almost all the years of the new republic. So Brazil is a quite fragmented political system, or have a quite fragmented political system, between 20-something and 30-something political parties, depending on the specific year. But all those parties actually organize themselves around these 2 main contenders in the national election. So it was a kind of bipartisan organization of the political system. So the fact that we have here another political party tells you something about the size of the political change that is happening, because the political system got stabilized through these political parties. By now, we're not so sure that the new republic has actually ended. That's an open question. There's lots of analysts saying that it's already done. There are other analysts that say that it's an open question. That depends on what would happen on the next presidential elections, and I'll come into that at the end of this presentation. So in order to understand what's the role of civil society in democratizing the state, let me move to this slide. So what's the role of civil society after transition The literature on transitions, or what we call transitologists, in a bit of humorous way of calling them, put forward a clear, short, and sharp diagnosis, but a wrong diagnosis about the role of civil society of transition. The prognostic was civil society of transition goes home. That's it. Because we would have regular institutions functioning normally, and those institutions, parliament, political parties, would be able to deal normally with political conflict. So there was no reason for civil society state playing a main role in national politics. So it was expected to go home and to take care of more communitarian local issues, leaving the national political stage. Did civil society went home? No. So we had in 1986 170,000 civil society organizations, and by 2002 we had in Brazil 276,000 civil society organizations and non-profit entities. This is by figures from the Brazilian Bureau for National Statistics, the IBGE, or Instituto Brasileiro de Geografia e Estatística. This is by very restricted criteria. In order to be in this account, within this list, you need to have a fiscal number. So if we don't take account fiscal numbers, actually the size of civil society in Brazil, it's several times bigger than this figure. So I'm plotting here this trend of growth. You have here civil society organizations or non-profit entities per capita in all Brazilian municipalities. All Brazilian municipalities means the 5,570 Brazilian municipalities, all associations in those municipalities organized by quintiles of HDI. Those are all the quintiles. As you can see here, there's a clear trend of growth. So we have a clear pattern of growing after transition. Civil society was growing. The growth is bigger in the second term of Fernando Henrique Cardoso, but the trend is still going. In the first term and second term of Lula, it goes up to the second term of Dilma Rousseff. What is outstanding here is that the municipality with higher figures of Human Development Index perform better, as expected, because you have more state capacity, you have more money, there's more way of supporting civil society organization. So the trend is common across all Brazilian municipalities organized by quintiles. This is a very broad definition of civil society. This is all non-profit entities, which means everything that is not state-owned, everything that is not profit-oriented. So it includes civil society organizations, professional associations, cultural associations, churches, unions, political parties, unclassifiable entities, all in everything. I can assure you that if we take a more restrictive criteria for defining civil society, producing a definition that is closer to the normative understandings of civil society, like engaged in public sphere, etc., the trend still holds. But what happens is that the position of the quintiles change. But the trend is exactly the same. I can show you a figure about that if you afterwards, if you like. So, how come this was possible? How come the literature on transition was so badly wrong regarding the expansion of civil society in Brazil? So first of all, let me tell you something about how relevant are these figures. So obviously, from the point of view of the internal trajectory of Brazil, the figures are meaningful because there's growth. So the point of comparison is the first point of the series. So we have growth. So internally, they are meaningful. But this amount of civil society organizations is actually relevant comparing with other countries. So we have a parameter. But there's no international clear parameters for that, but we can, let me give you just a parameter, which is a comparison with Mexico, which is one of the most comparable countries with Brazil in Latin America. So in Mexico, in 2010, we have 2,325 civil society organizations that, by data from the Comisión de Fomento de las Actividades de las Organizaciones de la Sociedad Civil, which is a body from the third sector created to count third sector entities. So it's official data from the third sector in Brazil. 4 years before that, in Brazil, we have 276,000 civil society organizations, as you see in the previous slide, and that by a very restrictive criteria, which is the criteria using the fiscal number. Without fiscal number, also official data from Brazilian government, in this case from the map for the civil society organization, we have in Brazil in 2024 830,000 civil society organizations. So if we keep to the more conservative or stick to the more conservative number, while Brazil is twice the size of Mexico, it has 20 times more civil society organizations. So that gives you an idea that this is a phenomenon, an outstanding phenomenon.
But do they adopt the same definition, legal definition?
Yes,
what?
A very broad definition.
So this is like harmonized.
Yeah. So how can we explain this? First, there are several causes. You're going to find different causes in literature, so I'm just going to mention those causes very briefly and give you a different cause, which is part of the main argument of this presentation. So you're going to find in literature that church act as institutional incubator of the civil society organization. So the church founded lots of grassroots civil society organizations, lots of civil society organizations in different issues, pastorals, during the last years of the dictatorship and during the first years of the republic. But church was not the only actor engaged in funding and supporting civil society organizations. There was a huge investment, a heavy engagement of all organized actors in Brazil in the creation, funding, and supporting of civil society organizations. So unions create lots of civil society organizations. Professional associations create lots of civil society organizations. Political parties create a lot of civil society organizations, and civil society organizations create a lot of civil society organizations, all those intending to foster democratization. So we have a huge movement to create more civil society organizations. Then we have a fourth common characteristic invoked in literature, which is the characteristics of the transition. So as I just told you, the fact that we have a constituent assembly immediately after the dictatorship made a huge difference for allowing these actors to keep mobilizing themselves for having influence on the making of the constitution, and as well the right for the freedom for association right was restored a few years before than the right to organize political parties. So during a short period, if you want to do politics, the best way was founding a civil society organization because political parties were still banned. So you have several traits of the Brazilian transitions that help to explain this growth. And obviously, the last and most commonly mentioned characteristic is a kind of tradition of popular mobilization in Brazil. So there was popular movements, and that makes a difference. I would like to highlight a different cause, which is related to the main argument of this presentation, which is the trajectory of institutionalization and democratization of the state. So here I'm using a graph from a student of mine, Natalia Bueno, and here you see federal transfers to non-profit entities in Brazil. So as you see, there's a clear trend of investing public money, transferring public money to civil society organizations. We know that the bigger amount of transfer were not at federal level, were happening at the state level and at the municipal level. So there's much more money that coming into civil society organizations for supporting the workings of civil society organizations. Part of that workings are intended to produce social control over the state within policies. So if you are funding with public money this kind of roles, you need specific institutions to allow this kind of social control over policies. Obviously, there's always the possibility of resorting to contentious politics. So there was lots of contentious politics along the years of the new republic, but we also produce lots of participatory institutions. and participatory institutions were created with the intention or with the aims of allowing social control over the regular workings of regular operations of the state within specific public policies. So here I'm showing you just a map, a brief map of participatory institutions in Brazil. We have in the dark pink lines participatory budgeting, councils, national policy conference, watershed management bodies, public hearings, participatory urban plans. This is not all the participatory institutions we have in Brazil. These are just the main families. And then we have subtypes in each one of those families, different types of participatory budgeting, different types of councils. I won't go into that in detail. I just want to call your attention to this kind of, it was lilac lines, not lilac here, but I think. So these types, specific types, involve kind of gray lines, let's say. They share certain features.
What's meant by watershed?
Watershed management bodies, they are committees that decide about the policy, the uses of the water in specific asset basins. They are participatory, they are bipartite, civil society.
So water board?
Yeah, water boards, defined by watershed.
Is this like only rural, or do you have it in urban areas as well?
If the basins are urban, you have them in urban areas as well. So those are, just take a look to those that share those characteristics, because those characteristics make up what we call the Brazilian model of social participation, or the Brazilian model of participatory institutions. So all those institutions are normally institutionalized, which means they are created by law, they are created by decrees, they are created by formal regulations, they have powers granted by regular formal regulations. They have institutional support of the state, and they are institutions themselves. Secondly, they are policy oriented. So this is not a kind of institution that is aimed to produce, for example, local development, which is a very common sphere of civil society integration. All those institutions are organized in order to produce policy influence. So social control over the regular workings of the policies. All those are civil society driven, which means that they are not intended to have regular citizens, ordinary citizens. There's no citizens there. There are just civil society organizations. All the seats are for civil society organizations or representatives of the government. So ours is civil society that actually is performing this function of controlling the state in those institutions. And finally, all of them work in a multi-level fashion, which means you have the same institution at the federal level, and the state level, and the municipal level. So National Council of Health, State Council of Health, and Municipal Councils of Health in all the 5,530 Brazilian municipalities. So that gives you an idea of how this works. So before moving into the diffusion of those institutions, so if you have a diffusion of civil society, you should have as well a diffusion of those institutions for allowing the role of civil society. Before going to that, just let me give you a very brief definition of councils, because we are going to look at councils for see this trend of expansion. So councils are created by law or decrees at the federal level, state level, or municipal level. They are bounded by self-regulation, what we call regimentos internos, so they produce their own rules for internal division of labor, elections, the way they spend money for supporting their own work, etc. They have a bipartite composition, at least 50% of civil society, and in that case, 50% of state representatives, but we can have more than 50% of civil society, so at least 50% of civil society, which means civil society organizations. And finally, what those channels are actually doing is extra parliamentary representation by civil society organizations. Because although we call all those institutions participatory institutions, actually we're not having participation there, because those are civil society organizations speaking on behalf of certain groups, speaking on behalf of certain public concerns of certain issues of interest of certain social groups. So what we actually end doing in the years of the new republic in Brazil is produce a trend to the pluralization of political representation in Brazil. So new ways of political representation by new actors in new instances that performing new functions. And by new, I mean not the traditional actors, so no political parties, no political professionals, not producing law, all that kind of functions. And this is the place that civil society actually was able to open in the new constitution, performing this role of pluralizing the representation in political representation in Brazil. So this is the trend. And as you can see, again, I'm plotting all Brazilian municipalities organized by quintiles, all governments from Polo to second term of Lula. And here I'm plotting councils per municipality, so the average number of councils per municipality in all Brazilian municipalities organized by quintiles. As you can see, you have a clear trend of growing in all quintiles. All again, you have higher speed of growth and a bigger number of councils in the quintiles with high human development index. So the expansion is happening even despite unequal state capacities, because municipalities with lower human development index have less state capacities. But what is more interesting in this graph is that, as you can see here, the expansion of councils is already happening immediately after the 1988 Constitution, during the first elected government, which is a right-wing government. Or is a right-wing government. So the trend to the increasing of councils is already in its way here. And then we have the two terms of Fernando Henrique Cardoso. Fernando Henrique Cardoso is depicted by more leftist analysts as a radical neoliberal administration. I would say it's not, it's kind of moderate neoliberal administration. And then we have the two terms of Lula that we can name, following Marcos' novel characterization, as progressive neoliberal terms. So during the years of neoliberalism in Brazil, we have this trend of civil society expansion and participatory institutions expansion following the democratization of the state, producing this kind of strength that I already told you at the beginning of my presentation. So very briefly, what does civil society actually do in those councils? I need to shift in the kind of data I'm using here. I need to look at decisions of councils. There's no official data on decision of councils or resolutions. So we worked along several years to construct two big data sets of resolution of councils. By now, we have more than 30,000 resolution of councils in 6 big Brazilian cities. This data allows for a very fine-grained understanding of the types of the decisions civil society takes in specific moments, in specific places of the country, in specific policies. I don't want into that deeply because there's no time. I just want to give you an overall picture of the kind of influence civil society is having in this country. So we have more than 70,000 councils in Brazil. So several councils by 500 municipalities gives a huge amount of councils. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of variation, not all function well. So in order to make simple this complexity, we can say that we have mainly 3 types of councils. We have councils with low level of institutionalization, councils with middle level of institutionalization, and high level of institutionalization councils. As you can see here, low level C3 type councils, lowly institutionalized, take very few number of decisions, but middle level institutionalization councils and high institutionalized councils takes lots of decisions, and they decide about the following issues. So here in the light top part of the bar, light blue top part of the bar, are definitions about self-regulation. So they decide about their own affairs, producing these regimentos, so these internal rules regarding the internal division of labor and so on. and so forth. The second darkest blue share of these bars is about policy decision making, which is interesting because actually civil society is taking decisions on the definition of the policy in these cases. They are defining the scope, they are defining the aims, they are defining the way of implementing, they are defining the way the policy should be accountable. Then we have this light, again, this light kind of blue, which has a specific name I can't recall, but let's say there is a light blue. Those are decisions for oversighting policy. So civil society is acting in process like an agent of social accountability, holding the state accountable for policies. And then the bigger number of decisions are about management. So civil society is heavily engaged in the regular management of policies. And this is important because if you want to dismantle this, you need to put something in place. It's not like saying, just stop participating and go home because you are not welcome any longer. You can do so, but then you have to put another institution in place because those actors are actually playing regular roles in the function of the normal functioning of policies in Brazil. And this small number of decisions is regarding other participatory institutions because Fonseca helps in the working of other participatory institutions. So those are the trends. So I hope you are convinced by now that we have a trend of increasing importance of civil society organizations performing roles for controlling the state with specific approach, set of decisions taken with those aims during the New Republic. But as you know, Matthews happens, and we were hit again by another trend, and this trend is called far right, arriving to the federal government. So I would like to read you two small parts of speeches, one from President Bolsonaro and one by Lula. So the first speech, I quote, says, "We do have to deconstruct a lot of things, although a lot of things so that afterward we can start building. If I can serve at least as a turning point, I'm already very happy." This is a speech by President Bolsonaro at the dinner at the residence of the Brazilian ambassador in Washington in the third month of his term. And as you can see here, in the picture is Bolsonaro surrounded by very fine people, as Steve Bannon and Olavo de Carvalho, the guy with the brown suit. On the other hand, we have President Lula, and I quote, the speech says, "The diagnosis we received from the government transition office is shocking. They drain resources, they dismantle, they destroy, they disorganized, they plundered. It is upon these terrible ruins that I assume the commitment together with the Brazilian people to build the country." This is a speech by President Lula on the Big Revoke Day or the Big Revoke Act. Big Revoke,
Was this after the rioting? The storming into the presidential palace of the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
It was after.
Yeah, it was after. So this is, this is the revogazo. Revogazo is a nomenclature in Spanish and Portuguese. We have a nomenclature for intensity and for size. This is for intensity. However, so let me. This was actually in the second month of the third term of President Lula, exactly 1 month after having assumed the presidency. So let me just compare these two speeches. The first speech, Bolsonaro is referring to the legacy of the New Republic. So in the understanding of the far right, which is somehow delusionary, the New Republic is 2 or 3 decades of communism in Brazil. So all the institutional legacy of the New Republic is a heavily left-leaning institutional development that should be erased from the earth, from the face of the earth. Brazil should go in the right direction, which is we should demolish all the things that were constructed during the New Republic. So it's about destroying or deconstructing, in a more polite way, all the legacy of the new republic. On the other hand, Lula is saying they destroyed the legacy of the new republic. It is upon the ruins of the legacy of the new republic that I assume the commitment of rebuilding all that. So was Bolsonaro will succeed in destroying everything that he wanted to destroy? I can tell you that despite Lula's speech, the results are mixed, and that's very interesting. So if we look at the two things we have been looking here, at the expansion of participatory institutions for allowing policy influence through civil society, and the support, financial support of the workings of civil society, for the workings of civil society, you're going to see that the results are mixed. So this is, in terms of participatory institutions, we found dismantling and resilience. Bolsonaro issued a decree, the 9759 decree, on the fourth month of his term, and the decree was intended to, and I quote, this is the official aim of the decree, terminate all collegiate bodies of the federal administration. So 700 collegiate bodies. We don't know where did they get that figure, because actually like a huge figure. But as you can imagine, this creates a lot of contention, a lot of social mobilization. The wording is quite important here. So the decree is not saying that they're going to terminate councils or watershed management committees or conferences or audiences. Say is going to terminate all collegiate bodies, which means they use the broader word they would find in the dictionary. So it's collegiate bodies. So that means that whatever had a small smell of having participation, no matter for what purposes, no matter doing what, is going to be terminated because of that decree. So it's a blunt measure, and they actually didn't even know what this measure would terminate, because there's so many things that would be in place. So we had to track all the decree was defeated because the Supreme Court ruled against the decree, the executive decree, basically because you can't change laws or things established by law through decrees because of the hierarchy of the hierarchy, structural hierarchy of law, decrees of lower level, so you can't change laws by decrees. So the decree was defeated, but not Bolsonaro's intention. So after that, they produced lots of new decrees, carefully drafted, targeting specific issues, and they published lots of infra-legal administrative measures with the same general end of terminate collegiate bodies. So we tracked all the decrees and all the infra-legal rules produced by Bolsonaro administration, by the 4 years of Bolsonaro administration between 2019 and 2022. And these are the results. We found 103 collegiate bodies, not the 700 they mentioned. And as you can see here, the results are mixed. So of those bodies, 34% remain unchanged and active after civil society, after the 4 years of Bolsonaro administration. That means that Bolsonaro was not even able to change a rule of those councils or of those collegiate bodies. However, on the other hand, we have a little bit about 28% that remain active but heavily changed. So in that case, those collegiate bodies have diminished functions. They change the size, they change the number of councillors, they change the number of meetings, they reduce the number of meetings, the time duration of the meetings, they quit financial support. So those are bodies that actually were diminished through the Bolsonaro administration measures. And then we have another third of collegiate bodies that are mainly inactive. The part of that actually is of interest here, because those councils here were already inactive before Bolsonaro administration, in this red part of the pie, of the chart pie. So in the red part of the pie, we found the revoked and inactive councils. So Bolsonaro actually handled to revoke 13% of those councils. So the result is mixed, as you said. How about financing? So again, I'm putting here the whole series for the federal transfer to non-profit entities. The part you saw before was up to here. So the increasing of federal transfers goes up to Dilma too, government, and his tenure on Bolsonaro. So the transfers actually felt, but they fell because of the economic and political crisis and the interplay between economic and political crisis that actually produced a huge economic crisis in Brazil, and because there was shortage of money, not because civil organizations were forbidden, but because there was shortage of public money and shortage of private donors' money. We know that during those years, Brazil lost something like 25,000 civil society organizations because there was the money that was impossible to keep those organizations ruling. However, as you can see, there's not a trend of diminishing the transfers for right-wing governments. Look, Bolsonaro is investing in civil society organizations. Not just is investing, the higher figure of the whole series is a Bolsonaro year. Not casually or not by chance, because this is the year of the elections, 2022, and Bolsonaro was pouring down money all over society and all over civil society in order to get elected. Happily, he didn't succeed. So the fact that there's transfers is still coming to civil society doesn't mean that the thing didn't change. They actually changed, and let me show you the last result before I sum up. This is a very recent result last week produced by a colleague of my team research on the Center for Critical Imagination, Mayra Rodriguez, who actually was here last October and the event was organized. So this is the finance to civil society organization project by federal government. It's a sample. We have in round red nodes civil society organizations, in square blue nodes projects. So you can see here the second term of Lula and Bolsonaro. We have a plural way of financing, no? Lots of projects and lots of civil society actors. And this is demand-driven. That is why you have so many dyads. So one specific organization telling federal government, I want to do this project because it's important for the kind of commitments I have. So could you finance this project? And the government finance that project. That is why you have so many dyads. This means one civil organization, one project, government financing, one project. So this is the commitment of the state to foster civil society organization in doing whatever they are doing. On the other hand, you have a clear different pattern, which is Bolsonaro pattern of financing. We moved from having 73 projects in this sample to having just 8 projects, and this is a heavy centralization. So here's federal government saying, if you want money, you need to work in the things the government wants you to work in. So those are the projects. If you want money, work in this. If you want money for work on your own stuff, just look money elsewhere, because federal government is not financing civil society per se. Financing civil society for in projects of the interest of government. So there have been changes actually. This is bad for civil society. It reduces its autonomy for deciding where to work. It makes it very dependent on the state, and the state really drives the kind of work civil society is doing. So again, the result is mixed. There's money, but the dynamics of financing have changed. So the last slide, why sweeping reforms in Brazil have failed? I need to be cautious here because obviously all the data here, because I've been presenting you here, could be viewed through the metaphor of the half glass, half full glass. No? So it depends on what part you are looking at. It could be terrible, or it would be good, or not so bad, or not so good. So I'm not saying here that Bolsonaro administration did not produce damage. It produced lots of damage in civil servants, in public, destroy a lot of public information, produce heavy damage in specific policies. The administration of the management of the pandemic was just disastrous. Brazil is among the worst, if not between the worst, but is it is very below the average of governments regarding the number of deaths. So there was damage. However, the sweeping reform intentions failed. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about mixed results. Yes. So why? I would say that there's two main reasons. Although civil society activism would say that is because social mobilization play a role, but at this level of politics, actually, we have heavier institutional factors playing, which are more important. So first, we have a strong division of power in Brazil. Congress is not subordinated to federal executive power, and the Supreme Court is not subordinated to executive power. Bolsonaro even tried to govern without Congress because he campaigned against Congress. He campaigned against regular politics, against traditional politicians, against traditional political parties, against corrupt politicians. And he even said that he won't have pacts with none of those guys for doing politics in Brazil. I don't know how you would be thinking that government would be possible without political parties, but that's the commitment he did, and he tried. By the time he realized that that was not simply possible, it was too late, the third year of his mandate. So he made a pact with Congress, but mainly because he was worried about being impeached because of the disastrous administration of the pandemics. So not too much time left for doing deep reforms. No? The Supreme Court also ruled against too many acts of Bolsonaro. So most of the things of Bolsonaro actually were changed through administrative measures and decrees, not laws. Second, we have a strong federalism, which means that in Brazil, not just states are members of the federal pact, municipalities are autonomous members of the federal pact. Municipalities are not obliged to obey policy orientations by state level, neither by federal level. All are autonomous entities. So that gives you strong conditions of having big measures of major cities like Sao Paulo working as opposition forces, as well as governors working as opposition forces. That's perfectly possible. Just to give you a quick example, Bolsonaro delayed as much as possible the purchasing of international vaccines because she was a denialist or a negationist. And the governor of the state of Sao Paulo decided to produce all the vaccines for Brazil. It's a government saying, if federal government don't want to produce vaccines, no matter, I will produce the vaccines for all the country. So as soon as Bolsonaro realized that that would be against his interest in re-election, he ran and bought vaccines in the international market. So that gives you an idea that we have, let's say, different powers in play that counteract Bolsonaro's intention. Going more specifically to the thing we are talking here, which is the democratization of the state. By now, I hope you are persuaded that the pluralization of policy governance in Brazil it's a future of the Brazilian state, not of one specific government. It's a future of the Brazilian state. So the role of civil society organizations, the role of participatory institutions, it's deeply ingrained, is deeply entrenched, is deeply institutionalized in certain policy areas. In order to change that, in order to de-democratize the state, you will need sweep reforms, and that demands a state reform. And Bolsonaro was not in conditions to deliver a state reform, So whatever he changed it in a more superficial level. However, 2026 elections are coming, and the prospects are worrisome. Bolsonaro is ineligible due to a Superior Court electoral decision because of economic and political abuse of power. That is why the cartoon depicts Bolsonaro as like a political zombie, saying the candidate is me, or I'm the only candidate. Well, most of well-informed politicians know that he is already a political zombie, but the longer he can keep his name in the table, the more influence he's going to have in defining the next right-wing and far-wing candidate for the 2026 presidential elections. Lula is ahead in the polls now. The last figures of this month is Lula is 30% of the spontaneous intentions of votes of Brazilian voters against 30% of Tarcísio de Freitas. Tarcísio de Freitas is the most likely candidate from the right and the right-wing forces, is governor of Sao Paulo. So Lula is ahead. That difference is still early to say how significant it is, and is not too much. And Lula is an old guy now, and he's facing amazing difficulties to govern because now we have a conservative Congress. So the conservative Congress is blocking almost everything Lula wants to do. So Lula is facing a very hard time. We are not so sure that Lula will be in a good place or in a good position for running as presidential candidate in 2026. What we do know is that a new far-right government would be devastating. It would be devastating because they have learned how to do things, because they develop certain expertise, because they have the new example of Trump doing things in a different way already with certain knowledge of how to do things, because they have a conservative Congress now and a good number of conservative senators in the Senate, because they have already appointed 2 justices to the federal court, and they would have the chance to appoint at least 2 more justices. So the prospects are bad. So the point is in the air, and we are worried about the following events of Brazilian conjuncture. So thank you very much.
We have a few minutes for some questions.
I had a question because in the graph you showed that there was more federal spending with CSOs during the time of Bolsonaro. But are there patterns of the types of CSOs and their inclinations politically? Is there some sort of breakdown or patterns on what they were spending money on, the government?
In other words, do we have right-wing CSOs?
Certainly.
Or is there a concentration with that? Is that how?
Especially geographically.
Those are the differences of the organizations. So we have development civil rights organizations, which is gray line with more presence in lower quantity municipalities.
Yes.
So that's important.
These are service providers.
They're kind of service providers, advocacy, NGOs. Then we have religious that are concentrated in high quintiles, because they are kind of dependent associations. So, for example, evangelical associations make their living with deliveries, so they concentrate in big cities for their people. So there's a correlation between the size of the cities and the organization. And so these are the main, let's say, legal types. We know that money in Lula's era, and this kind of more left government of the new republic, funded heavily these kinds of organizations. And that is why the pattern is inverted.
Which one?
The gray ones, the ones of
Okay.
the development and civil rights. They are called civil organizations for civil defense, or for right defense, organizations of right defense, they are called in Brazil. And that is why you have an inverted pattern. You have more of these organizations working in poor municipalities because there's public money from that. So this is the kind of strength of let's say the years of the new republic actually was able to invert something that otherwise would be happening, that is having most of the organizations working in poor areas. In Bolsonaro, we know that there's a trend of changing. There's new actors coming, lots of new actors, lots of religious actors, lots of religious organizations in Congress in certain specific areas. And by now, there are certain areas like dealing with people with problems of consumption and addictive substances, but they mainly driven by evangelical citizens. So, as you saw in the slide, there are a bigger number of civil organizations financed by Bolsonaro government, but that is a recomposition of the kind of civil society organization that can be found.
And sorry if anyone else has questions, and then I'll ask a question later. Maybe. So we don't take up all the time.
Yeah,
Wrap up and go because they have a class of two.
exactly. Just realized that there's class here too, but thank you so much for Professor Adrian for the talk and for everyone.
لا